So, Social Security. If you're anything like me, just hearing the words makes your brain want to hit snooze. But here's the thing. This stuff matters. Not just for someday, but for right now. For all of us trying to build a future with some kind of stability baked in. With all the talk from Elon and his discovery of so much corruption in the government, it turns out it's way more complicated than we know. And way more important. Especially if you're like me, juggling trades, side hustles, and wondering how many times you can ask your financial advisor, "Wait, what's a Roth again?" before they block your number. This week, we're diving into a topic that affects every single one of us eventually. When should you take Social Security? Now, I'm no expert in retirement math, or any math really, outside Fibonacci retracements, but luckily, I don't have to be. Because today, we've got someone who is. Dr. Scott Brown is one of our go-to experts when it comes to all things economic, big picture thinking, and yes, Social Security. Whether you're retired, semi-retired, still trading full-time, or just wondering if your future self is going to be okay, this article's worth your time. So grab a cup of something strong, coffee or conviction, and let's get into it.
You know, you scroll through the news, and bam, there it is again. Social Security faces serious financial shortfalls. It just, it makes you worry, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. In those headlines, they definitely grab you. But, the idea that Social Security is about to go bankrupt tomorrow, it's mostly a misunderstanding, sometimes even, frankly, a misrepresentation.
Right. It gets repeated so often.
Exactly. You really need to look past the alarm bells.
Okay, so that's what we're doing today. We're going to cut through that noise, really dig into what's actually going on with Social Security's finances, what it means for you, and then, really importantly, we'll pivot to a personal choice you can make that could significantly boost your own retirement.
Yeah, and to guide us, we're looking at some great material. We've got an article from Pitt News Magazine by Scott Brown, Ph.D., and also insights from the Stock Market Cheat Sheets newsletter, featuring analysis from Professor Lawrence Kotlikoff over at Boston University. Really solid stuff.
Perfect. So let's tackle that big one first, this imminent crisis idea. If it's not going bankrupt, what is the real picture? What are the projections actually saying?
Well, the reality is quite a bit less dramatic. Even if policymakers did absolutely nothing, Social Security is projected to pay out 100% full promised benefits for at least the next decade.
The next 10 years, fully funded.
Yes. The latest trustee report actually pinpointed full benefits until 2035. And crucially, even after that point, the system could still cover, at least 3/4 of the promised benefits from ongoing revenue. It's not like falling off a cliff.
Okay, so more like a funding gap that needs attention, not an empty vault.
Precisely. Think of it like a bridge that needs some reinforcement down the road, not one that's about to collapse entirely.
That helps frame it. So if it's not like my bank account running dry, how does it actually work day to day? How does the money flow in and out?
Right. Well, fundamentally, it's what we call a pay-as-you-go system. So the benefits getting paid out today, they're mostly funded by the payroll taxes coming in from people working today. And the scale is huge. Just last year, the system took in over $1 trillion in revenue and paid out about the same in benefits. It's this massive, constantly flowing financial engine.
And the trust fund we hear so much about, where does that fit in? Is that like a rainy day fund?
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. For, more than 3 decades, Social Security actually collected more than it paid out. So it built up this big reserve, about $2.9 trillion in its trust fund.
Wow, $2.9 trillion.
Right. But since 2021, expenses have started to edge out income slightly, so the system has begun dipping into those reserves. They're expected to basically bridge that gap for, about the next 10 years or so.
Okay, right. Now, this is where I think the real anxiety kicks in for people. What if those trust funds run out? Does everything just stop? Do the checks disappear?
The $1 million question. And probably the biggest misconception out there. The answer is a clear no. Benefits would absolutely not just cease if the trust funds were depleted.
Really?
Because those payroll taxes from current workers that keep coming in, that ongoing revenue stream would still cover a very significant chunk of the scheduled benefits. The latest estimates suggest, for example, by 2035, even with no changes, incoming taxes could cover about 80% of benefits.
80%. Okay, not 100%, but definitely not zero.
Exactly. And maybe 74% way out in 2096. So, look, a reduction would be a serious issue, no doubt. But the program would absolutely continue to operate and pay benefits. It wouldn't just vanish.
That's such a crucial point. Okay, so why do we hear different dates then? Sometimes it's 2035, sometimes 2033. What's with the shifting timelines?
Yeah, that just highlights that these are, projections. They're based on complex economic and demographic assumptions, things like birth rates, wage growth, lifespan. So 2035 is the trustees' best current estimate for the combined funds.
Their best guess, basically.
Sort of, yeah. They actually give a range. They think there's an 80% chance it happens sometime between 2032 and 2039. And then you have the Congressional Budget Office, the CBO. They use slightly different assumptions and land on 2033.
So it's not a fixed date?
Not at all. They're valuable guideposts helping policymakers understand the time frame, but they aren't crystal balls predicting the exact day. Things change.
Perfect.
Okay, stepping back from the numbers for a second. Why is Social Security just so important? Why is it considered such a cornerstone program in the U.S.?
Well, beyond the finances, it's widely seen as, one of the nation's most successful, impactful, and favored programs. It really provides that essential income floor for millions of retirees.
A safety net.
A huge safety net. And it's not just retirement. It's also incredibly important social insurance for workers who become disabled and for families, who tragically lose a primary earner. And its effect on poverty is just staggering. Social Security lifts more people out of poverty than any other single program in the country. Seriously.
Right.
The data shows that without it, something like 21, almost 22 million more Americans would be living below the poverty line.
Wow. That really puts its impact into perspective.
It really does. It shows how fundamental it is to economic security for a vast number of families. So, given its importance and the projected shortfall down the line, what does this all mean for policymakers? What kinds of actions are actually on the table to sort of shore up the system?
Well, the broad agreement is that policymakers do need to act. It's not something that can just be ignored indefinitely. As the population ages, naturally, the program will require a larger share of national resources. Adjustments will be needed.
And is there public support for making changes?
Interestingly, yes. Surveys consistently show that people are actually willing to contribute more to ensure Social Security remains strong. There's a real understanding of its value. And it's worth remembering, the last time solvency was really addressed was back in 1983. Since then, things like rising income inequality and the increasing cost of untaxed benefits like health insurance have kind of eroded the program's tax base a bit.
So adjustments might be needed there.
It suggests that exploring different ways to ensure adequate revenue, maybe looking more at higher earners, is definitely part of the conversation. There are options.
Okay, so that's the big picture, the policy side. But let's pivot now, because while that's happening, there's something you, the listener, can actively control. A decision that can hugely impact your own retirement. And this brings us to Professor Kotlikoff. He argues very strongly for waiting until age 70 to claim benefits in most cases. Why is he so adamant about that?
It really boils down to a pretty simple but powerful mechanism in the system. Your benefit amount increases every single year you delay taking it, right up until age 70.
So the longer you wait, the bigger the monthly check.
Exactly. It's like a guaranteed return offered by the government. And frankly, it's usually a much better return than you can safely get elsewhere for that portion of your retirement income.
Okay, but it's tempting to grab it earlier, right? At 62 even. What are Kotlikoff's core arguments for resisting that temptation and holding out until 70?
He lays out 7 really solid reasons. The first, and maybe the most obvious, is simply maximizing your payouts. Waiting until 70 gets you the largest possible monthly benefit for the rest of your life. We're talking potentially like 32% higher than if you claimed at your full retirement age, say 66 or 67.
32% higher. That's substantial.
It really is. And that leads to the second point, increased lifetime income. If you expect to live a reasonably long life, and as we'll see, many people do, that higher monthly payment adds up significantly over the years, potentially tens, even hundreds of thousands of dollars more over your lifetime.
Okay, what else?
Third, it's crucial for protecting survivors and spouses. If you're married and you're the higher earner, delaying your benefit means if you pass away first, your surviving spouse can step up to receive your higher benefit amount. That can be incredibly important for their financial stability later on.
I hadn't thought about that aspect.
It's a big one. Fourth is inflation protection. Social Security benefits get adjusted for inflation each year. So the higher your starting benefit is because you delayed, the bigger your inflation-adjusted income will be throughout retirement. It helps maintain your purchasing power.
Keeps pace with rising costs. Makes sense.
Fifth, it helps mitigate retirement risk. Having a larger guaranteed inflation-adjusted income stream from Social Security acts as a really strong buffer against the risk of, well, outliving your other savings. It's longevity insurance, in a way.
Okay, 2 more.
Sixth is tax efficiency. Depending on your other income sources and early retirement, delaying Social Security might actually help you manage your overall tax burden. A larger portion of your benefit might be non-taxable if you wait until other income potentially drops off.
Interesting tax angle.
And finally, seventh, healthcare considerations. Let's face it, healthcare costs tend to rise as we age. Having that larger, stable Social Security check coming in can provide crucial funds to help cover those potentially significant expenses later in life.
That's a very compelling list of reasons.
Yeah.
Can we put some numbers on it, like a concrete example for someone?
Absolutely. Let's make it tangible. Imagine someone, let's say their full retirement age is 66, and their benefit at that age would be $1,000 a month. Pretty straightforward number.
Okay, $1,000 a month at 66.
Right. Now, if they decided to claim as early as possible at age 62, their benefit would be permanently reduced by 25%. So they'd only get $750 a month.
$750 instead of $1,000. Ouch.
Yeah. But what if they waited until age 70? Their benefit increases by 32% above their full retirement age amount. So that $1,000 becomes $3,320 per month.
Wow. So $750 versus $3,320. That's a huge swing.
It's a massive difference per month. Now think cumulatively. If you start at 62, by the time you hit 70, sure, you've collected benefits for 8 years. 96 months times 750 is $72,000.
Okay, $72,000 you wouldn't have had if you waited.
True. But from age 70 onwards, you're getting $320 instead of $750. That's $570 more every single month. The math shows the break-even point, where the total amount received by waiting catches up and surpasses claiming early, is typically around age 77 or 78.
So if you live past 77 or 78, waiting was the better financial move purely in terms of total dollars received.
Exactly. And considering how long people are living now, well, that brings us to the next crucial piece.
Right. This whole strategy hinges on living long enough to make waiting worthwhile. What are the actual odds? How long are people living these days?
This is where it gets really fascinating, and it really underpins Kotlikov's argument. According to the Social Security Administration's own data, about 1 out of every 3 65-year-olds today, slightly more women, 39% than men, 34% will live to age 90 or even beyond.
1 in 3 will hit 90. That's higher than I might have guessed.
It's much higher than it used to be. Think back 1940, only about 15% of 65-year-olds made it to 90. We've seen dramatic increases in longevity.
And that trend is continuing.
Yes. Projections suggest that by 2050, thanks to medical advances and other factors, it might be over half of 65-year-olds reaching age 90.
Wow.
Half. Now, reaching 100 is still relatively rare, maybe 4 or 5% of today's 65-year-olds, but even that probability is climbing steadily.
So the takeaway is plan for a long life.
Absolutely. Your retirement planning has to account for a pretty decent chance of living well into your 90s. And if you're planning for that kind of longevity, the strategy of delaying Social Security until age 70 to maximize that guaranteed inflation-protected income becomes, well, the most robust and logical approach for almost everyone.
So wrapping this up, it feels like we've covered 2 really vital sides of the coin. First, understanding that Social Security as a system isn't collapsing, but it does need attention and strengthening. And second, the immense power you have through your own claiming decision, especially delaying until 70.
That's right. It's about shifting from perhaps anxiety about the system's future to empowerment through understanding both the big picture and your personal levers. It really is about playing the long game for your own financial security.
So here's something to think about. Knowing what we now know about longevity trends and the significant financial upside of delaying Social Security, how might that change not just how you plan your own retirement, but maybe even the conversations you have with your parents or your kids about their financial futures?
Because trading isn't just about charts and candles. It's about what we're building toward, what we're protecting. Dr. Brown has a way of connecting the dots that really makes me think about the choices I'm making now and what they might mean 20 years from now. For some of you already on Social Security, maybe this article felt like good news. For me, who's not quite there yet, and still trying not to think about what there even looks like, maybe not so much. Which is why learning to trade matters so much to me. Because Doc Brown gave us a little hope in the short term, but long term, the future still feels kind of fragile, and I don't want to wait and see if Social Security will be there when I retire. I want to build something now, so it's not a question later. So here's to every one of us working toward our own version of security. One chart, one trade, one espresso-fueled session at a time. Thanks for listening to Pitt News on Air. I'm Claire, and if this one got you thinking too, let me know. And hey, don't forget to subscribe by visiting pitnews.com. That's pitnews.com. I'll be here next week. Hope you will too.